Henry Salvatori was a very successful businessman. He was a great student of American history, particularly the founding. He was very impressed by George Washington and many of the others there who had started this country, and he became a great patriot. He gave a good deal of money to philanthropic purposes, particularly for educational institutions, a number of different colleges, to promote the study of the United States history, particularly the founding, and of the American culture and American principles, constitutionalism, things such as that. Well, Henry Salvatori loved America. The Salvatori Prize, which is established by the Heritage Foundation in memory and appreciation for Henry Salvatori, is looking to people and organizations that promote American principles, constitutionalism and the rule of law, and who are active in making this a better country in the image that the founders began.
Please welcome to the stage the Heritage Foundation's Vice President of the Edwin J. Fulner Institute, Angela Saylor.
Good afternoon, everyone. You know, the American story is a masterpiece and a work in progress. It chronicles the brilliance of imperfect people striving for a more perfect union, those who have overcome challenges to make a difference for an extraordinary nation. In 1776, the founders declared independence and held these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. The past year revealed the breadth and depth of those who love our nation and also those who carry a disdain for our nation's history, founding principles, and values. But through this tension, the conservative movement has defended the American identity by bolstering personal responsibility, liberty, constitutional government, and the rule of law. It is my honor to salute our 2021 Salvatori Prize recipient for American Citizenship. Dr. Robert Jackson, Chief Academic Officer for the Great Hearts Academy and Director of the Institute for Classical Education. Congratulations. Dr. Jackson has been on the front lines defending the private virtues of moral character and responsibility. That responsibility that's necessary for a strong community and nation. Dr. Jackson is leading the way to overcome dynamic challenges to cultivate the minds and hearts of students through the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. In 2019, our President Kay Coles James founded the Edwin J. Fulner Institute at the Heritage Foundation to undertake a multi-part strategy to promote American values to a variety of audiences, some of whom have been underserved by conservatives. In partnership with leaders like Robert Jackson, the sanctity of our American ideals are safeguarded, and their validity and relevance is promoted to all Americans, especially to those who have lost confidence that our nation is a land of hope, opportunity, and community for all. The American story is a tapestry of nearly 250 years of dreams, accomplishments, and innovation. Dr. Jackson's work sows meaning into the American story. His leadership is an investment into the great work confronted by every generation of Americans, the protection, the preservation, and the transmission of the American identity. Dr. Jackson, on behalf of our President Kay Coles James and the entire Heritage family and all of those who are gathered here today, we thank you for fighting for an America where children, no matter their zip code, have access to an excellent classical education. Thank you for fighting for truth. Education is concerned with the pursuit of truth. It also means equipping people with the knowledge, skills, and habits they need to become responsible citizens. As Samuel Adams explained, For no people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can any be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. So thank you for fighting for an America where liberty, equality, and opportunity aren't just gifts we inherit, they're the endowment we pass on. Your graduates are equipped with the ability to make wise decisions and the character necessary to improve their own lives, their communities, our nation, and the world. Please take a look at the video to honor Dr. Robert Jackson.
The Great Hearts Network has changed the lives of over 20,000 students in 33 academies in Texas and Arizona by providing life-changing classical education. With nearly as many students on the waitlist as in the classroom, this classical education network has seen great demand from parents who want their children to be educated in environments where young minds and hearts are cultivated through the pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty every day in the classroom. The Great Hearts Network has become the largest provider of liberal arts classical education in the country because of the leadership of its chief academic officer, Dr. Robert Jackson. Jackson spent nearly 2 decades playing a key role in promoting civic and personal virtue by strengthening and expanding classical education, training future teachers for a dozen years in the foundations of educational history and philosophy. By demonstrating the efficacy of classical teaching, they have the ambitious goal of tripling the number of K-12 students in the U.S. receiving classical education to 1.5 million students in the next decade.
I've always been so impressed with your relationships with students, with your ability to eloquently and beautifully articulate your love for literature, for education, for history, for good, true, beautiful things. And even from the very beginning, I was always amazed at how students would say Dr. Jackson's class is the hardest option and the best option.
It is not intellectual brilliance that animates the impression I hold of Rob. Rather, it is his heart and his voice, which are quite simply the heart and the voice of a teacher.
One of the things I've noticed about Rob is how deeply formed he has been by his own long and ongoing study of literature and poetry. He will effortlessly make allusions and drop in quotations from various poems and books that are right to the point of an idea or a concern that we're addressing on the council.
At a time when so many families are rightly lamenting the weak state of American civic education today, Robert is doing something to change that. I am honored to call Robert Jackson a friend.
On behalf of the entire team at Heritage, I would like to thank you for advancing the American founding values in the face of the left's hostile messages that chip away at the spiritual, moral, political foundations of our beloved country. Your schools embrace the foundational principles that created this nation of limited government and individual liberty.
The Salvatori Prize is awarded annually to an American citizen or organization who upholds and advances the principles of the American founding, embodies the virtues of character and mind that animated the founders, and exemplifies the spirit of independent and entrepreneurial citizenship in the United States. For these reasons, the Heritage Foundation is honored to bestow the 2021 Salvatori Prize for American Citizenship to Dr. Robert Jackson.
Please welcome to the stage our president from the Heritage Foundation, Mrs. Kay Coles-James, and our Salvatori recipient, Dr. Robert Jackson. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Robert Jackson.
Thank you so much. I am truly honored to receive this prize endowed by the late entrepreneur and philanthropist Henry Salvatori. And to my colleagues here at the Heritage Foundation, I can't tell you just how truly, deeply moved I am to be a part of such august company. You saw several of the images there from past Salvatori Prize winners. This is just a group that I admire in the extreme. Salvatori, as was mentioned, an Italian immigrant who clearly understood the value of education and spent nearly 30 years of his life running a company, founding and running a company before selling it and dedicating the remainder of his long life, nearly 40 more years, to the philanthropic support of civic and educational institutions. That seems like a pretty good formula to me for some of our entrepreneurial friends. 30 years to build a sizable fortune, and then 40 years to wisely distribute it. His example and this prize are both reminders of the perennial need to revitalize civic education, especially at this time. What and how we teach the young will determine what becomes of this nation. The next generation, succeeding ours, must be taught to revere the heroes of our past, from whence we can expect them to emulate the virtues that they've always brought honor to a people: justice, courage, self-control, and wisdom. However, if we teach our children to resent, or, in the parlance of the day, de-platform heroes, we can expect them to reject the arduous pursuit of virtue in favor of contemporary fashions of thought, simple slogans and popular sound bites. Interestingly enough, Salvatori, nearly 50 years ago, addressed this challenge in his moment when he said, and I'm quoting here, "The revolutionaries and critics of our society, lacking wisdom and understanding and beguiled by ideology, focus on the unresolved problems of our nation and demand instant solutions. Deficient in perspective and realism and with little understanding of our inspiring history, they would destroy the highest civil order ever created by man, the United States of America." Today, that civil order is in jeopardy because our nation has failed to fully educate the country's children with that generous and capacious form of liberal learning, that perennial form of education that draws on 3,000 years of extraordinary content and effective pedagogy. When we refer to classical education, we are speaking of what former ages knew simply as good schooling. Now, for 25 years as a professional educator, I have been fortunate to experience the intellectual and spiritual friendship of many, many colleagues. Alongside my loving family, these colleagues form a community from which I have come to participate in this renaissance known as classical education. From fellow scholars and one of my students who is seen here from the King's College in New York, to colleagues and co-workers at Great Hearts and at the Institute for Classical Education, and now to peers across this country, I am blessed to collaborate with such thoughtful and committed persons. These are people who measure success not in terms of next year's test scores, but in the next generation's respect for the Republic and their fidelity to first things. You too should join this classical renewal. And in fact, in some ways you already have, because it highlights the best thought and expression that our tradition holds. Great books is often the reference here, but it presents that content in an artful manner, what has been referred to as a great conversation. It is never too late to get started reading the texts and discussing them and discovering afresh what is truly good in life. Now, anyone can purchase the perennial classics and place them on the shelf for show, but it's good educators, good teachers who are able to help students grab hold of the ideas, the images, the propositions, the characters, and those historical episodes that inform and infuse the great works. Students become active participants in an ongoing conversation on how to flourish as a human. While great works and masterful teaching have frequently been displaced by an assortment of progressive ideas and practices, as was mentioned earlier just a moment ago, parents possess an innate desire for a more reasonable and attractive approach to education, one that overcomes the leveling effects of the educational status quo. In the wake of this most recent pandemic, more families are now waking from the slumbers of mediocrity to discover a more excellent way in this form we refer to as classical. If we are to recover the principles and virtues that produce what Salvatori called the highest civil order ever created by man, we must rediscover the perennial form of education that shapes young souls to know the world they inhabit, to obtain the freedom of conscience, and to play their parts within families, neighborhoods, houses of worship, and other free associations as they become the next generation of Americans committed to the advancement of an ever more perfect union. Thank you.